Good evening and welcome to NAIT's virtual Alumni Lifelong Learning event, Eating Healthy on a Budget, presented by Rylan Krause. As is our tradition at NAIT, we honor and acknowledge that the land on which we learn, work, and live is Treaty 6 territory. We seek to learn from history and the lessons that have come before us, and to draw on the wisdom of Canada's First Peoples. Only through learning can we move forward in truth and reconciliation and to a better future together. My name is Dawn Lehman, and I am a proud NAIT alumnus and member of NAIT's Alumni Association Advisory Committee. Today, I am happy to serve as your host. And before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. The presentation will be recorded, and upon entry, your microphone was automatically muted. However, we encourage you to turn on your video so we can see you. Please use the chat feature to raise your hand. Questions will be addressed throughout the presentation. As NAIT alumni, you are automatically members of the NAIT Alumni Association. The Alumni Association has benefits like today's event and other events, discounts, and services. Today's event is sponsored by our affinity program partner, TD Insurance Meloche Monex. As alumni, you receive preferred rates on TD home and auto insurance. For more information, visit the alumni website at nait.ca/alumni. Let's meet our presenter, Rylan Krause. Rylan has been the Executive Chef of Ernest dining room at NAIT since 2019. In his role, he has supported student outcomes by promoting a positive and dynamic classroom environment that allows students to showcase their skills and achieve their culinary goals. Rylan has worked in various locations, from the snow-capped Rocky Mountains in Jasper to the German capital of Berlin. His focus has been on the development of culinary programs from small-scale restaurants, including vegan, gluten-free, raw restaurants, while ensuring profitability and customer experience. Rylan's passion is rooted in full food utilization and keeping an EYS, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, on emerging food trends. Welcome, Rylan.
Thank you. Yes, as Dawn said, my name is Rylan Krause. I'm the Executive Chef at Ernest Dining Room at NAIT. If you are unfamiliar with Ernest Dining Room, it is a live classroom, meaning that our students are live cooking for the restaurant. So the restaurant is actually student run. We are but shepherds to help fulfill their outcomes. So if you ever have time, please come down. It's a great restaurant, really affordable prices, and you get to support student outcomes, and they're doing some great things. Every Thursday, Friday, we have student projects where they present their own menus, really fun. So please come down whenever you'd like. One thing I would like to point out during this presentation, please feel free to cut me off at any time. I'm used to working in kitchens where I have a stack of questions because no one lets me answer a question before someone asks the next one. So I have absolutely no problem with you interjecting because I think it's good to just ask those questions when you have them. I will admit this is my first time presenting on WebEx. So if I mess something up, like I missed the chat or I don't see a hand raise, Dawn has been given the green light to just cut me off for you. But if anything goes wrong, that's totally my fault because, again, this is my first time using WebEx to present. Normally, I'm used to using Teams or Zoom or Google Meet. So please bear with me. The other things, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the housekeeping. We'll get into this, like we alluded to in the description. The focus of this presentation will be upon trying to find affordable ways to eat healthy in a grocery store. So I'll go through a couple examples just to kind of put into context the way food costing can kind of work in your benefit if you're willing to put a little bit of effort in and just kind of, keep a keen eye to what you see out there. So I am going to share my screen and the presentation. So everyone can see that okay? Okay, perfect. All right. So I've titled this Food and You, the Grocery Store Battle, because I feel like every time I go into a grocery store, I have to battle with my temptation to purchase everything and focus on the things that I actually need. So Some of the points that I like to consider when I go to grocery shop and, to try to adhere to my budget and to adhere to trying to eat in a positive way, I like to focus on a few different things. First and foremost is seasonality. The second is looking at whole foods versus processed foods or prepackaged foods. I also, to help reduce some costs, I like to think about some batch cooking. When it comes to cooking, I try to be realistic, and I also try to always try new things to keep the excitement up in the kitchen, because then I actually eat the things I purchase. So first off, we'll talk about seasonality. What do we mean when we see seasonality? Basically, what we're trying to do is select products that are picked during their optimal growing cycle during the year. So this is like, when apples come into bloom in Kelowna, we're picking those. We're picking apples, peaches, plums, blueberries, strawberries, things like that. We're buying them when the local environment, or as local as we can get, is having them actively ripen on the vine, and you get a much better product during that time. Versus picking something like, right now, if you try to buy fresh blueberries, and we're going to talk about blueberries later, you're going to be getting them from like Peru or Chile or something like that, and that's just going to change the quality of the product. Admittedly, seasonality can be a very difficult thing to focus on in Northern Alberta, because our growing seasons are so short. It does put a bit of a strain on us, because we're not California, we're not Chile, we're not places like that where there's the growing seasons much longer, and you can have access to these things a little bit in the future. But there is some things that we can do to try to focus in and deal with the fact that we live in Northern Alberta and winters are brutally cold here. So why do we want to focus on seasonality? First off, I would say the purchase prices when things are in season are significantly less. A great example, like I was saying, is blueberries. When you can buy a pint of blueberries in the summer for $3.99, you're buying 100 grams for the same price right now. Also, the taste and flavor of the product itself is greatly affected when things are in season versus when they're not. You're also supporting local economy, because if it's in season, you're probably purchasing it local. And there's also some environmental factors that we can kind of briefly touch on. That's not really the scope of this presentation, but I always like to bring it up because I think that's an important thing. So the purchase prices, it tends to be that when you purchase a product in season, the consumer cost is significantly lower. This is due to a couple things. One is just the pure cost of production. So when we're trying to produce things outside of season, we have to put a lot more effort into them, a lot more inputs of costs and labor and things like that, mean that that purchase price is going to be passed on to the customer. We also have a situation of yields. So if something is, you probably, if you do any gardening, when you plant a few potatoes, once they're in season, they come up like crazy and you're flooded with potatoes. You just get more from it because, again, it's what it's designed, that plant is designed to do that during that time. So the higher yields means cheaper prices, and also the cost of transport. We've seen it very, very recently with the supply chain issues, how much transport really affects the cost of goods and the availability. So the further something has to travel from you, there's a price associated with that, and it's going to get passed on to you. So if you're willing to spend money to, again, transport blueberries from Peru right now, well, there's going to be a cost associated with it versus the ones that are produced in Canada during the summer. So we just kind of have to make some choices based on those factors. Oops. Does it not want to? Oh, it's because I switched off. That's right. So for the example, to start with, we're going to talk about the blueberry, which I believe is Mother Nature gift to humankind. I don't think it's my favorite fruit, but I think it's one of the most interesting fruits. And I just love to talk about it. So this isn't the most thought-provoking slide, but I just wanted to kind of show you a price comparison of blueberries on the current market. All these prices were taken off of the Real Canadian Superstore's website. I just used their online shop feature just to kind of give you a comparison. So right now, if you are purchasing fresh blueberries, you will be getting conventional, so not organic or not wild picked. They're originating in Peru. They're about 340 grams, and they're costing you $5.99 for that packet, which works out to be about $1.76 per 100 grams, which is pretty high. They're because these are out of season, one of the things I like to do is purchase frozen fruits, because these frozen fruits are called individually quick frozen, or IQF. Basically, they're picking these fruits, they're immediately freezing them whenever they picked them, whenever they're in season, and then they're able to be stored. So you get a berry that is picked immediately. So the flavor's better, the quality is better. The only downside is it is going to be frozen, so your applications will have to be a little bit different. So for this, you're looking at about pretty much a one-for-one comparison in the quality of or the style of product. You're looking at 88 cents per 100 grams. So you're about half the price in just the price of blueberries, because you decided to take into account seasonality. Blueberries are out of season right now. They're going to be expensive. You're going to save a lot of money doing frozen. Let's say that you thought, it's just the sizing, this is only 340 grams. That's kind of small. So I went with a bigger container. This is maybe something that would feed a family of 4 before the berries would spoil. Again, these are produced in Peru. We've dropped our price down to about $1.37 for 100 grams, which is actually pretty good. I found a product that is a very good comparable. The Superstore carries this really neat line of frozen fruit called Naturally Imperfect. And this one, it's about 2 kilos, which in a freezer, like I find that is a pretty good size, but you're down to about 70 cents for 100 grams. So still about 67 cents difference, which is almost double. And let's just say, for argument's sake, because I kind of wanted to go full out with this, is if you want to do organic, surprisingly, Superstore has fresh organic blueberries right now that are originating in Canada. The price is astronomical at $2.80 per 100 grams. Where there is this Canadian Wild Blueberries IQF product that is also from Canada, and it's probably the comparable to organic. It's about $1.32, so over half the price of that as well. So just by choosing frozen blueberries over fresh blueberries, you still get the fruit, but you're getting half the price right there. So I just did a quick summary of what I would have in my house. We go through between my partner and myself, about 4 kilos of frozen blueberries a month. Costs about $27.98. If I did the comparable using the fresh, I'd be at $55.92. So just by choosing frozen fruit, my blueberry budget is like half of what it would be. When I did this, I was thinking about doing my budget and having a line item that just said, rent or mortgage 2, car payment, blueberries, and seeing $55 on my monthly bill shocked me. Seeing it at $27, that feels a little bit better. So just deciding to pick something with keeping seasonality into account, doing something like this could save you a lot. Again, if this was the summer and you're picking blueberries, those numbers would be a lot closer. Unfortunately, I can't get historical data to put this in, and I don't think you'd want to hear more talk about blueberries. I think we probably want to move on from that, but it would probably be a little bit closer. But what I'm saying is, in the winter and things like that, we just have to keep these kind of considerations in, because this is just one product. This is one single product going into your grocery cart. This could be strawberries, apples, pears, lettuces, all those kind of things. When you're in that produce section, you're going to see all this, and all those little things start to add up, and you can start to chip away at that. One of the big questions on this, as we talk about how we want to eat healthy on a budget, the budget is only part of it. We got to think about utilization of these things. So I put here, in the summer when these berries are fresh, they're extremely easy to use. You toss them in pancakes, you put them on yogurt bowls, you add a little bit of milk and have them with milk and cream, or cream and berries. You have them fresh out of the container, whatever you want. They're very easy to use fresh berries. And if you wanted to, during the summer when they're really cheap and at the peak of their freshness, you could freeze them and save them yourself. And then you buy them cheap and you have those frozen ones. In the winter, it gets a little bit difficult where you're using frozen fruit. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to thaw frozen fruit, but basically it just doesn't work, because when the water molecules freeze, they turn into these ice shards, which breaks down the cell walls, which turns it into kind of a goopy mess. So what I try to do is just think about different ways to use that. So a big one, why I go through 4 kilos of blueberries in a month, is I'm making smoothies probably every single day. Using those as a backing to thicken them up and to flavor them. I might make preserves. So say in the summer, I'm making a yogurt bowl, I'm adding fresh fruit. In the winter, I'm just cooking down those frozen berries, maybe adding in some other flavorings if I want. I might sweeten them if I feel they're too tart. And then I'm using that kind of fresh preserve on in a yogurt cup kind of the same way those yogurt cups have that, I think they're called like fruit at the bottom or something, and you stir it in. You're basically just making your own blueberry yogurt. You can buy the 4-kilo thing of yogurt much cheaper than the 2 or the 1 liter blueberry flavored ones. You could also do things like make sauces, you know, or jams, like I said, with preserves, you can make jams, things like that. So you're still getting that fresh fruit. You still get to utilize it in the way you want without having ingredients or sugars or salts or anything like that that you don't want. But you just have to be a little bit creative with that and put a little bit of effort in. But I mean, dumping some frozen blueberries into a blender is pretty simple. Or even just dumping some blueberries in a pot with a little bit of water, touch of sugar, maybe some vanilla, and then you can make yourself a preserve pretty quickly. So one of the things, another thing that we want to think about is with these products is thinking about flavor, because at the end of the day, if you don't like the way something tastes, you're just not going to eat it. So we don't have to kid ourselves. This is where I was saying be realistic with it. If you're purchasing something and you're not going to eat it because it doesn't taste very good, it's just going to die on your shelf. So when we have fresh picked fruit in season, the beauty of it is it's allowed to ripen on vine or on plant before it's picked. This enhances the natural sugars and the natural flavor compounds within that product, and it helps to maintain nutrients because you're eating it as quickly as you can, because if not, it would spoil before that. The nutrients are really maintained, which again, as we're talking about healthy eating, I think that's an important part of this. Fruit that's picked out of local season, so again, going back to these blueberries, these ones coming from Peru, they're picked underripe because during the transport, they have to be able to have that buffer window of ripening. So they're treated with some gases and things like that to help to ripen them faster. If you've ever stored apples and bananas together, that applies to tomatoes. Yes, it does. Tomatoes is the exact same thing. They use ethylene gas to help ripen them. So they'll pick them green and they ripen in the truck or in shipping containers or on the boat or whatever that looks like. So you can actually do this as an experiment at home. Store a banana beside some apples. Banana will go really quick because the apple's actually naturally off gas. So if you have some bananas that are underripe and you need them quicker, pop them in a paper bag, pop a single apple in there, you'll be good. Another big downside of this is when you pick these things underripe, the sugars in these products, the starch won't develop or won't convert into sugars, which is much more appealing for the human palate. They won't fully develop. So you'll get very bland, boring, gritty is mostly from the ripening, fruit. And again, you're probably just not going to want to eat it. I don't think I'm a picky eater. I eat everything because I have to, but even that is a stretch for me. Also, these flavor compounds and these nutrients, they'll deteriorate during transport because as things ripen, they adjust, and the nutrients they're going to start to leach out, and you're going to lose those. So the actual health benefits of these things, I read this article once about, it actually did follow blueberries, or it followed a bunch of different agricultural products and how during the season it goes from Canada through the US down into Central America. And then it also did an analysis of nutrient components based on different areas that you live when it came, and they are significantly less, which is unfortunate. So it's something to think about. But again, those IQF berries, because they're frozen in state, at that ripe point, their nutrients will be maintained. One thing I just did want to point out, because this matters to me, I know it's not necessarily the most applicable to healthy eating, but one of the great things about focusing on seasonality is the local economy. And a way to look at this too, in the sense of, again, is the flavor is you're going to want to eat this is, you know, as things travel longer, you tend to lose some of the quality. I just made a reference to jet lag. I know when I travel through multiple time zones, I'm not at my best for a little while. Whereas if I just go to work, I'm much better. And Edmonton's actually really blessed that there is a lot of great producers around the city. A lot of times these products will be a little bit more expensive because they're not artificially subsidized by a bunch of different things. But one of the things I like about this is when you go to these markets and you go meet these people, you are picking out something, you're getting really connected with that food. You're going to pick out exactly what you want. You're not just going to fill your basket because you're there. And then because you put this effort in, you're going to have much more appreciation for it, and you're going to be excited to cook it, and you're going to want to eat it and not just park it in the back of your fridge and then remember it in a couple of weeks because you had to take the time to go chat with someone. And I find that anytime something tastes good, you have much less waste because you're actually going to want to eat it. If things don't taste good, you just don't want to eat it. I can't force myself to, no matter how hungry I am. And you get a added bonus of meeting the people that get to grow your food. You get this respect for that product. I put it to something like, I put mom's lasagna, but I was kind of thinking about at Christmas, my mom made way too many pierogies and cabbage rolls, and I was sitting on them for like 2 weeks, but I kept going back to eating them because I knew how much effort she put into making them. And I wanted to show that respect, even though she didn't know that I was eating them, but I kept doing it. Versus if I would have just bought those at the store, I would have given up way earlier, because I get food fatigue really fast. So there is something nice to that, because if you respect the food, you're actually gonna want to eat the food that you spent your money on. So this is, we're going to discuss some whole foods versus processed foods. And this will be more applicable kind of to more of the healthy eating, I think, because of the control you have. There is a phenomenal book, if anyone is interested. It's called What to Eat. It's by Marion Nestle, a really, really beautiful mind, doing great work when it comes to food studies. I think my sister showed me this book when she was studying to be a nutritionist in like 2006, and I probably read it once every 3 years just because I find it so fun. But one of the big takeaways that I found from this book was her idea that you focus on the perimeter of the store. I guess in Superstore you'd end up in like the medicinal part too, but let's pretend the normal layout of a grocery store. So on the perimeter, you're going to see things like the fresh produce section, the bakery, the deli department, the dairy section. If there's a butcher or a fishmonger, those will be there. They're really, the whole foods are on the outside, and it's the interior aisles is where you start to see more packaged things. So if you try to focus on the perimeter, you're going to be buying more whole foods, less processed, and that tends to be healthier because there's not a lot of additives. When it comes to affordability, the way I like to think about it is you're not paying someone to do the work that you could do for you. So if you're buying something like a processed tomato sauce, you're paying for that factory to put it together, when it's a very easy recipe that you could do yourself, just with a little bit of know-how. And you can also control what's going into that, because you can see what's there. Those foods tend to be more nutrient dense because the less a food is processed, the more nutrients it maintains, and it'll maintain it for a longer period. So if you do have those fresh tomatoes and you cook them down and then eat them right away, you're going to have more nutrients left in them than if they're sitting on a can that was processed, I don't know, let's just say for argument's sake, 6 months ago. There is going to be a nutrient loss there. One of the things that I would highly suggest is to take time to read the labels. There is some really, really good processed foods, but some of them have a lot of additives. So there could be a one-to-one product. Let's say canned tomatoes. Some of them are just tomatoes and maybe some herbs and oil. Some of them have a bunch of additives to maintain structure and to flavor them and to season them and stuff like that. So I like to make sure I read my labels and trying to avoid things like artificial colors and preservatives and stuff like that. When we're focusing on the perimeter, I don't think they're going to sit there and dye their apples to try to get you to buy them. They might spray them with some water, but they're not going to do any preservation to them. So you know that you're getting a pretty whole product once it comes out of the field. I just did a quick cost analysis of something like a simple marinara, just so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about when we're looking at whole foods. So this is a very basic recipe. There's a lot of information, but the big thing that I want to take away from it is just the cost per 100 milliliters. So to make marinara, you're basically taking tinned tomatoes or fresh tomatoes. You're probably throwing some garlic in there, a little bit of olive oil, some fresh basil, red pepper flake, and salt. You put it in a pot, you're cooking it down with a lid, you're letting it simmer, and you're blitzing it maybe. And for you to produce a liter of this, and again, all these prices are taken off the Superstore's website and just costed out, you're looking at about 25 cents per 100 milliliters of sauce. You're probably not going to make much less than a liter. And I don't know if you're going to eat a liter, say there's 2 of you eating dinner, you're probably eating about 500 milliliters. So you're going to have this benefit of having this extra sauce left over. But you're paying about 25 cents for 100 milliliters versus the store-bought marinara that I found. I found 2 different ones. Actually, really great ingredient list. There's only a couple additives, which is nice with these ones. But again, you're almost doubling it. You're getting about half the size because this is probably a portion size that a family of 4 might go through for a pasta night. So you're not going to get that added bonus of having that extra stuff kicking around when you need it later. But again, you're looking at about 54 cents or 58 cents per 100 milliliters. Doesn't seem like a lot. That's only what, a quarter and a bit. But this is just one of those products that keeps adding up. We could keep doing this through your entire grocery list. But if you're saving 50%, we're looking at right now on every single item, think about how much less your grocery bill is going to be just because you put that little bit of effort into buying whole foods and putting some effort in, you know. So, sorry, let's go pull that whole statement. Yeah, so that's exactly, I think that's great. So the question is, I read once buying them as whole versus crushed in relation to canned tomatoes is also better, more nutrient dense as it's processed less too. Exactly. So when I buy my canned tomatoes, I just buy the whole tomatoes. All that's done to them basically is their skins are removed. I don't bother with the diced ones because you do pay a little bit more per gram as well. Again, the less we process something, the more these nutrients are hanging out. And that's their whole point, right? Because besides the fact of satiation from an energy perspective, we do want to have all those nutrients in our food. So that way, when we make those food choices, besides the fact of feeling full and having energy, we're also getting those macro and micronutrients that our body so dearly, dearly craves. I'll have one last little thing when it comes to whole foods versus processed foods. I just wanted to give a quick, oh, sorry, Don, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was just wondering. So there is always the health food aisle
Yep.
full of processed foods that are healthier. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So a lot of, especially in something like Superstore, they'll have like the health or organic section. I'm pretty sure that they've officially named it like an organic section. At the end of the day, the best example I can think of is people hear that someone's vegetarian and they automatically assume that they're eating healthy because they're eating vegetarian, right? Like you're not eating maybe processed foods and all that stuff. But a vegetarian could sit there and eat potato chips as the primary thing. And when I was 18, I had a friend like that. Everyone thought he was healthy. And my friend survived on French fries, potato chips, and Kraft mac and cheese. Well, he was vegetarian, so that must be healthy. It was not. With a lot of processed foods to make them taste good, I think someone just commented in the chat the level of sodium. They dump salt in it, any kind of sodium to make it taste good or artificial flavoring. My thing with processed foods is, yes, you can go into an organic aisle. That does not mean it's healthy. You can put green on a label to make it, trick people, the consumer, to think that they're making a healthy choice. But that's why I'm saying read labels. You could probably find things that are way worse for you. I think almond milk can be a great example. You can have almond milk that is just basically almonds and water and maybe some nutrients that they add to it, like vitamins. But other ones are filled with sugar, salt, anything else to make it not taste like a non-dairy milk. It seems like you're being healthy because you're choosing a non-dairy alternative, but you're getting a lot of extra stuff in there. So I would really encourage just reading labels and not necessarily going through the nutrient guide. That can kind of be cumbersome and it takes a lot of time shopping, but just taking a quick peek at that ingredient list and seeing what's in there. And then you know what you're putting in your body as well. So that would be that's how I would speak to that. When we talk about the whole versus process, I just want to give a really quick example about probably the most consumed animal product in North America, the chicken. I can't remember the numbers, but it's insane how many chickens are butchered in North America every year. So when we think about a chicken, effectively we have various components to them. And I picked a chicken because this is probably the easiest whole animal to break down if you want to do it yourself. I believe, and I've done this because I have to teach students how to break down chickens, I could teach anyone to break down a full chicken by the third bird. I could teach you and you would do it perfectly every single time. But basically a chicken is made up of 2 breasts, 2 tenders, which is it's a strip that's inside the breast that normally comes off. You have 2 wings, the flat of it and the drum, so just the 2 different joints. You have 2 thighs, 2 drumsticks, and you have a carcass. I did the pricing for this using President's Choice free from line because I tried to pick something that was more one-to-one. This, I guess, they don't give them artificial feeds or steroids and things like that. I haven't looked enough into it. I just was using it for price comparison. So if you were to purchase a whole chicken, currently you would normally get one between 1.4 to 1.7 kilos, and it would cost you about $22 to buy a whole chicken. Like, this is unprepared, just a chicken. If you were to buy the individual components to make up that exact same bird, you would be looking at, I listed two different types of breasts here because there's the skin on version, which is a little bit cheaper, but most North American consumers tend to buy their chicken breasts with skin off, because there was a fad where we were saying that skin was unhealthy because there's the fat lining underneath it. So we were removing it to make a healthy option. I think keeping that skin on produces a more tender meat and more juicy, and you don't have to use as much seasoning, but that's to each their own. So we're looking at about 16 bucks for two breasts. The tenders, I mean, they get turned into chicken fingers, so I really can't price that out. When you break down a whole chicken, when we do it at work or in restaurants, normally we take those tenders out and those just become staff meal. The wings, we're looking at about $5.25 for the two sections. We're looking at about $3.45 for the thighs. The drumsticks about $3.33. You cannot buy a carcass off of a superstore. If you went to a good butcher, they would definitely sell you a carcass. So what I did instead is I just wrote stock, because probably you're turning from your whole chicken, you're turning your carcass into stock. So we're looking at about $2.49. So the price difference of taking, let's say 10 minutes to break down a whole chicken, you would save $8 just by breaking down a whole chicken. And this will get you multiple meals, because you're probably not going to eat a whole chicken in a sitting, even if you're a full family. But that's just one protein, probably two meals. You're saving $8 right there, just by buying something whole, and you get the benefit of all these extra products that come with it, that you just do a little bit of work and you get something out of it as well. So I think this is a really good way to look at it, because you can very clearly see that you put a little bit of work in. I don't know what you value 10 minutes of your time at, but I value it much higher than $8. And also I know that I'm getting a full bird that I get to process. I can see what the quality is across the board as I do it. And yeah, I just get to be a little bit more connected with it when I do that. And again, I truly believe by third bird, I could teach anyone to break down a chicken. So it's very, very easy. The other thing too that I will mention, we live in a golden age of recipes online, content online, Instagram, TikTok, all those things. My feed is always flooded. I'm always learning about new things. If you did want to learn how to break down a chicken, it's not like you have to buy the professional cookery cookbook that we had to buy for, $300 when we were in school, that I still reference, so it's okay. You could just go online in 2 minutes. You can find out a full step-by-step tutorial, the same way that I learned how to tie a tie by watching some guy on a really bad video on YouTube teach me how to do it. You can learn how to break down a chicken. So you do have the resources there, which is great. Another thing that I find that helps with utilization of food and intrigue is cooking in batches. I do not mean with this like meal prep, where on Sunday night you always see people post on their social accounts how they meal prep for the entire week. I'm just talking about, you're sitting down, you're going to make something, you make a batch of it versus a single portion. I always make sure that if I'm cooking things like from scratch soups, sauces, curries, even if I'm making breads or things like that, I do it in a batch that's bigger than the current meal that I'm going to eat. That might just be enough for leftovers, so that way my partner can take leftovers when she goes to work the next day. That might be so that way I can stash some things in the freezer and I have it, because if I'm making, well, I love making marinara. When I make it, I always make sure I make about 4 liters. I jar them up, individual portion or sizes, and I put them in my freezer, and then that way I have them when I need them. It's also a really great way to use up the products that you purchase. One of the downfalls I see for myself and for a lot of people is, you have a recipe, you want to make it, so it calls for half an onion. So you buy an onion, then you have half an onion, but you have no way to account for it. Well, if you just scale up everything so that way you can utilize all that product, you buy all this fresh produce and dairy and all those kind of things, and you use them up and you process them all together, and then you can break them down into smaller sections for you to use later. I cannot tell you the amount of times I buy fresh herbs for something I'm making that week, and then I don't have a plan for it later, and I just waste it. So then my food costs, yeah, I only paid $4, let's say, for a packet of thyme, but I only used half of it. So technically I paid $8, like for what I was using, because I'll have to rebuy it. So when you do it in batches, you're going to use up that pack size of whatever you have. Because unfortunately, they're not going to sell you half an onion or half a pineapple or, well, they would sell you 500 milliliters of cream, but not milk, things like that. So you're utilizing what you have. One thing I would point out is flavor fatigue. This is something I suffer from a lot. I find myself a very phasic eater where I will eat a bagel and then I'll eat a bagel every day for 2 weeks and then I can't eat a bagel for a month. Cooking in batches, sometimes I find this to be an issue because if I make a big batch, I did this one time in college where we made, I think it was probably about 12 liters of chili. And I ate chili for maybe 4 days and then I couldn't look at the rest of the thing because it just disgusted me. So one way I get around that is, sorry, I'm just gonna pull up this question. Would you put fresh herbs and olive oil and freeze in the ice cube tray or no? Yeah, you definitely can. I would, if it was me, I'd probably, depending on what kind of herb it was, I would probably process it a bit. So maybe like blend it or like use an immersion blender or a blender or even like a magic bullet or something. Yeah, with a little oil or even water, just so that way it'll actually freeze solid. Pop an ice cube tray, and then you have that, especially if you're making something like a sauce and you want it to do fresh basil, you could easily do that. And then when you're making your sauce, just pop it in, that little bit of water or oil is gonna melt out and you'll have fresh herbs. So yeah, you can definitely do that. Oops, sorry. So yeah, on the note of flavor fatigue, one of the things I do when I cook in batches is I tend to, and this might just be the nature of my friends, we'll tend to each make batches of things and then we'll trade things. So I might make like a chana masala and they might make, say, like a Malay red curry, and we'll swap containers. We just put them into reusable containers, we'll swap them out, we each do half the work and we get double the product. And it just helps me so that way when I do put this effort into batch cooking, I'm not getting sick of the same thing I'm eating. Another example is my mother-in-law. I hate baking. She loves baking. I love cooking. She's not a big fan. So she'll bake, a couple loaves of sourdough. I'll take one of those and I'll give her, I got a bunch of sunchokes for my neighbor one day. I made a bunch of sunchoke soup. So I gave her half of it and she gave me some bread back. I got something out of it. I got fresh bread, which I was never going to make myself. She got a bunch of sunchoke soup, which I don't even think she could find sunchokes if she tried. So we both benefited just because we coordinated a little bit. I think that helps a lot. I also find when I cook in batches, it helps reduce my takeaway bill because as much as I am a cook and I've cooked all my life, when I get lazy and it's Sunday and I just want to watch a movie, I can't get myself to make food. I'll eat cereal or toast or I'll phone for takeaway. And realistically, most takeaway is not the best for you, just by nature. So having that food that I batched out and maybe froze or something like that means all I have to do is walk over to my freezer, take out a 1 liter container, heat it up, and then I got myself, maybe make some rice and I got myself a meal. And I get to still be lazy, and it probably takes about the same amount of time that the takeaway would take to get there. So I like to do that. And yeah, like I said, sharing dishes, like I had just mentioned. Okay, oh, sorry. Okay, so that's a great question. One of the things to really help with freezer burn is you have to really worry about what the actual product is because different things react different ways. One is exposure to the actual air, like the air in the freezer, especially for proteins like your beef, your pork, your chicken and stuff like that, is making sure that they're tightly wrapped in airtight. That could be something as simple as having something directly in contact with the surface of it. So a good example would be your ice cream. When you get those ice crystals that form on top of your ice cream, if you actually had something like, say, a piece of parchment or even cellophane directly on that surface, there would be nowhere for that water to adhere to. Keeping a consistent freezer temperature, so not having fluctuations like opening it up nonstop. So if you have things that are going to be sitting, if you don't have, say, like a chest freezer, like it's just the one that's in your refrigerator, either under or above, the things that are going to sit in there longer, I'd put further to the back. So that way, when you do open it up to access, say, the novelty ice creams or something that I'm hopelessly addicted to, I don't have to affect the frozen stuff that I have at the back that I'm going to access less and less because the temperature will come up a little bit. You might get some ice formation and then it'll go away. Also, to deal with freezer burn, I would say just try to utilize the product in timely fashion. If you leave it too long, everything will eventually freeze or burn because it's a very, very dry environment in there. And eventually the moisture will just get sapped and then you get that really gross burn on it. So that would be what I would do, is just try to make sure that even though it's going in the freezer, there is a shelf life in there, it's elongated. And then, yeah, the things that you're not using as much, try to keep further back, and then just making sure that you reduce the amount of air that the product comes into contact with. So when I do this, and this is a thing that I have to tell myself every time I shop, is I need, even though, again, this is what I do for a living, this is basically my entire life, I'm apparently good at it to some extent because I keep getting jobs, is being realistic about your food choices. I am the worst for having these bursts of inspiration where on a Monday when I'm bored, I'm going to make all these great dishes all week. But then when work starts and I have to, all of a sudden I'm out, a student has an issue that I spend an extra hour at work, and then all of a sudden, well, I work nights. So let's say I get home an hour later and I don't feel like cooking, then all of a sudden I'm going to start wasting stuff. So if you are purchasing products that you think you're going to batch cook or you're going to, eat, is just be realistic about those things and have a plan to use those purchases, especially fresh products. So, looking at your weekly schedule, like, do you have time to actively cook these things? That's great that you're buying all these things, but are they going to get used? It's nice to think that we're really healthy and budget conscious when we're in the shop, but it's the execution when we get home that's really, really important. This is like what I'm saying with this burst of inspiration. When I'm in a grocery store, I start to see something, I'm like, I'm going to make this crazy thing, but it's like, Rylan, you just don't have time, man. Like, let's park it for another week or something, take a note and we'll do that later. And also having the knowledge to deal with these products. I like to push myself and buy new things and teach myself new things. But if you're, maybe you heard from a friend that, you can make this great, kale chips. And they're a great snack to have. But if you don't know how to make it, you buy a bunch of kale, who knows when that's going to happen. Okay, question is, what are my views on bagged salad? Consider it processed. No. So for me, if I would go to something like a bagged salad, I'd be looking at something that's the whole leaves, like those baby leaves. Really, they're just picked and washed, and then bagged and forced. I think it's nitrogen that they actually push into it, or maybe it's CO2 to stop oxygen from getting in. That being said, there are some of those processed salads where they're, chopped up, and then there's the wonton crisps and the dressings and things like that. Obviously, those components are going to be more processed, but the actual vegetables themselves, really, they're just picked and cleaned and broken down. That being said, if you have a bunch of shredded cabbage, say, in a salad, like you buy a thing of coleslaw with carrots and cabbages and things like that, you're probably going to have some nutrient loss because they are so cut up, and they're exposed to there's more surface area for it to be exposed to the environment, and they will have a degradation of nutrient from that. But I think, some of those bagged greens are great, especially in the winter when you can't, when you just don't have time to, buy whole heads of lettuce because they just don't look great. I often go for those clamshells of fresh greens. And some of the questions that I like to ask myself when I'm trying to be realistic in those moments where I'm somewhat sane is, do I have the time to prepare this? If I don't have the time, then it's just going to get wasted in the back of my fridge. Also, do I have the proper equipment to make this? I've just recently got a dehydrator. I've used dehydrators in a commercial setting all the time, but I just purchased a dehydrator for myself, and I've been dehydrating things like crazy. I never oven dehydrated because it's much more tricky. But once I got that dehydrator, once I had that proper equipment, all of a sudden it opened up a lot of things for me. But say you're buying chickpeas because you want to make hummus, but you don't have a food processor. Well, you're not going to cut it with a knife; it would never make it. So just kind of make sure that you have the equipment to make those recipes you want. Also, while we're looking at all these things, are you just making too much for that week that your leftovers mean that you're doing all this batch cooking and you bought some of that fresh things like lettuces and things that you can't really batch out? Are you going to forget about that and you just don't have time to have that meal? Like, this is what I'm saying with this meal planning. And then just a real good question for yourself: are you actually going to make it? Again, I'm a cook. I have inspiration all the time. I think I'm very smart. And then when push comes to shove, I will just not put the effort into making it. So I don't have to trick myself in the grocery store anymore. Grocery store Rylan and home Rylan are two different people, and they're at war all the time. Okay.
There's a question about, do you have a brand of dehydrator you can recommend?
Yeah, so there is a really great company called Excalibur that does either, I think it's 4-tray or 9-tray square, like it's a box dehydrator. I find the box dehydrators are much more convenient for counter space because by nature, a circle has a bunch of dead space because you can't really fit anything around there because most kitchens aren't circular with like rounded walls and things. Our walls tend to be pretty squared off. So I like those box ones. I believe that you can buy the 9-tray, which would be more than you would need. Somewhere around I want to say it's like $289, maybe up to like $319, somewhere like that. Really great. The nice thing with the dehydrator is there's not a lot of components that you have to worry about maintenance on, so they tend to run for a long time. When I worked, as my bio said, with raw food, we actually used the box Excalibur 9 trays, and we ran those things 24 hours a day, and I was there for 6 years, and I don't think I had to replace one. So they're a really great product. One quick last point that I had was try new things. The reason for this is when you're bringing different foods, like I said, with the food fatigue, if you get bored with that food, say it's apples, I can only eat apples like maybe once a week, so I don't buy very many apples. But if I pretend that I'm going to eat more, I'm just going to get bored with them. I'm going to leave them in the back of the fridge or in the back of the pantry, and then they're going to turn to mush, and it's never going to happen. I'm never going to eat it. So it's just, trying new things that excites your palate. It builds intrigues. You'll find these new products. Maybe you find something you like and you didn't even know it. I made a reference to smoothies at work. When I worked at one place, myself and one of my colleagues, we used to bring in different products and we would turn them into smoothies every day, or try to do it every day. And we're actually going to bring this back. But the nice thing with this is we were bringing in different fruits and sometimes vegetables that we were making in smoothies, and it forced us to try all these different things that we wouldn't normally try. So I had never had fresh dragon fruit before, and we tried it with blackberries, I think was the two that got brought in, and it made this wonderful product, and we just drank those smoothies for like a week because we couldn't get enough of them. Had we not just tried new things, we would have been drinking the same old smoothies and we'd probably get bored of it. Any tips? I think it said any tips to speed up the time it takes to cook. Again, really depends on what you're doing. I think having a really succinct plan on what you want to do helps a lot. Before I even start to cook, I have an idea of like what the steps are, what I have to do. I have this plan that I'm going to attack it with, rather than, once I start cooking, I'm like, oh goodness, I forgot this or I forgot that. So then I have to stop and shift gears. If I have a work plan, even if it's just casually in my mind, and I know before I start, I don't have those little gaps along the way, kind of like hitting red lights. Like if you hit all greens, it's the same distance to work. You can drive the exact same speed. But if you keep hitting red lights, you have to stop and then restart. So if I have to stop and go, oh, I think I wanted to blanch some carrots. Now I got to go find them and restart. It just screws up my cycle, and then that really slows me down. So I just try to have a really good work plan, and that works across anything, even if it's something as silly as making a yogurt. If I know the steps I have to do, let's go for it. Is there any reputable source of a list of in-season produce? What is it? You can recommend? That's a great question. Honestly, you know what? You stumped me there because I can't think of a list of produce. It would be more that you would know the region that you're in, and then some of the suppliers. Because right now, there's some greenhouses around that will produce like cucumbers and nightshades all winter. So those technically are in season for us. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if there's like a compiled list online. You could probably look it up and see what's around, say in Alberta or something like that. But you'd probably have to go more one-to-one on the products. Sorry, I don't have a really good one. What's your opinion on buying frozen fruits in bulk, i.e. meat? I mean, realistically, as you saw with the blueberry pack sizes, it tends to be the bigger amount that you're buying at one go. It tends to be cheaper. I noticed that too, even when I was looking up chicken. Like if I found a 4-pack of chicken breast versus an 8-pack, the price was significantly different. So I think that's a great idea as long as you have the storage space and you're not just overloading that space. That being said, I think it's a great way to utilize product because say you did have a backlog of, I don't know, let's say beef flank steak, and then you would see that in your freezer and say, okay, I want to start to chip away at this. What are some recipes I can use using that? And then when you go to the shop, maybe you buy some cilantro and some red wine vinegar and some chilies and you make chimichurri. So you can use up that product because you have it, versus being overwhelmed when you go into a grocery and you're like, what cut of meat am I going to get today? Well, what will go with that cut of meat? Well, what am I going to do with this vegetable? And it just kind of gets overwhelming. The more you can kind of limit your options and reduce that kind of paradox of choice, I think the more successful you'll be with that. So I think it's a great idea to buy in bulk. That's my presentation. I said I would go till 6:45 and I went till 6:50, so that was pretty close. I'm just saying. Is there any more questions that I can answer? I hope this was informative. I apologize because I find this topic extremely fascinating, so I can go off on wild tangents, but I try to stay on topic. Okay, so one of the questions, I've heard that there's still no clinical proof that organic foods have tangible benefits. So when it comes to that statement, I'm assuming what you mean tangible benefits being from a nutrient perspective. From my understanding, that is true, that I don't believe that organic inherently is healthier for your body, like more nutrient dense or anything like that. But you could make an argument that there is tangible benefits for the environment and for economy and things like that. But I think that's a whole nother discussion. But for the scope of this discussion, I believe that my understanding is yes, that organic foods are not inherently more nutrient dense than conventionally grown products. Do you have a list of local producers and their retailers? What I would do, I was actually going to make a slide about this, but I thought it was a little bit out of the scope of this. What my suggestion to that would be is check out, just go online to any of the local farmers markets or public markets. So there's like Bountiful, there's Strathcona, there's the 124th Street Grand Market. Check out those ones and they'll have a full list of all their suppliers, whoever's selling from there. Because I can rattle off some, vegetable producers or things like that. But like Peas on Earth is a great vegetable producer. Gull Valley does great tomatoes. Doof's does all those nightshades in greenhouses, like I was saying. Greens, Eggs, and Ham does some cool things. There's Sylvan Star Cheesery. Like there's all these things around. There's so many now. It's a wonderful place to be in Edmonton right now. So I would just suggest check out those farmers markets. Go on their website, and they'll have a listing of all of them, and you can just kind of click on them, link to their website, and see what they have available. The nice thing with vegetable producers is they often have up to date. They'll have the seasonality when it's available for, like, say it's sweet peas. It might be available from July to September, and they'll tell you right there. Aside from sodium, is there a nutritional difference between dried and canned beans? Vegetarian here. Not to my knowledge. The biggest difference with using dried or canned is obviously dried, you have to rehydrate. But from the actual nutritional difference, I think they're pretty similar. It would be obviously dried, dried legumes and things like that don't actually get treated with anything, whereas the canned ones will get treated with some additives, and they may season them as well. So you just have to double check the labeling on that as well. Love Peas on Earth and Gull Valley. Yeah, me too. Urban Stretch Pork. Yeah, that's a really good one too. There's tons of great producers. Like I said, we're kind of in a golden age in Alberta right now, where there's been a lot of support for local farmers and stuff, and I really like that. So, oh, there you go. Perfect. That's a really good link, that albertafarmersmarket.com. I'll have to check that out. It's my last slide. If you do have any additional questions, by all means, you're welcome to email me. My email is rylank@nait.ca. I like to talk about food, so if you have questions, by all means, feel free to email me. I will answer anything I can, and if not, I'll try to point you in a direction where you can get that information. I think it's great to know more about this stuff. So,
I was also going to mention that there are a few whole food providers within the NAIT Alumni Association business directory. that you can find. And I'll put the deli and catering section right into the chat to take a look at. Okay, so thank you, Rylan. You've shared a wealth of information and strategies we can incorporate into our grocery trips to eat healthy without breaking the bank. Our next scheduled events are the Value of Mentorship on January 26th, Valentine's Day Cooking Demo on February 7th, Building Personal Wealth, February 16th, Retire with Success, the Millionaire Mindset and Power of Financial Planning on March 15th. Please sign up if you haven't already. A special thank you to Affinity Program Partner TD Insurance Meloche Monex, a proud sponsor of today's event. To continue improving our program, we will be sending out a short survey after the event, and we appreciate your feedback. If there is something that you would like to learn more about or an event you would like to see us host, let us know. Thank you for attending. We hope to see you at future NAIT alumni events. Have a great evening.